Hi, people. Brini Maxwell here with another tour. This time we're taking a look at my kitchen. I renovated the kitchen around 12 years ago, and it has just undergone a bit of a refresh. This is my 1974 kitchen. Kitchens are fascinating. You can really tell what era a home is by the kitchen and the bathroom as well. So that is why they are so important for retro or period interiors, to create the kitchen in such a way that it really says something about the time period. So I did a lot to really focus in on 1974 with appliances, with finishes, with kitchen accessories and details and things like that. So let's take a look, shall we? So this kitchen was nothing like this when I started. In fact, the kitchen is probably the room that I made the most changes to when I moved into the apartment here. So the first thing that we did was we tore down most of this wall. So originally you entered the kitchen through here, and it was closed off from the rest of the apartment, as kitchens in the 1930s were. This is a building that was built in the 1930s. And so I decided to open it up, as they started to do in the 1960s and 70s, and make the kitchen part of the living space as well. The reasons for that were that kitchens became part of great rooms, and kitchens were focused on more with interior decoration. And here I have done all of that, made it more decorated, and also made it more part of the rest of the apartment, as it would be with a great room. I raised up the kitchen to be a step above the rest of the apartment. Now, in this apartment building, most of the apartments have sunken living rooms that create a sort of gracious living experience. However, in this apartment, they didn't do that for some reason. And so I sort of had a little bit of step envy, I guess, and wanted to put a little bit of a step in the apartment myself. So I did that with this. And at the time, I was contemplating shooting in here quite a bit. And so I thought it would be a good idea to have this different level, which would make sort of interesting visual angles for cinematography. So that was one of the big things. And then the other big thing, of course, is that we just took out all the cabinetry and started fresh. We went down to the studs. And I had my contractor, Roger, design the layout of the kitchen. He's very good at that. And so we ended up with a very efficient kitchen. We moved some things around. The stove and the dishwasher were originally in the opposite locations. The last major change that I made was to put this island in. And the island has really been a godsend. It's provided me with more storage. It's made a wonderful location to shoot at, so I can stand behind it, put the camera over there, and or do it as I'm doing right now and sit on the end of it. It's not only provided storage for the kitchen, but also for the living room as well. In the living room tour, I showed you the cabinet that holds all of the electronics for the television set, and that is in this island. Now, I styled the island in a similar way to the pass-through in the Mary Tyler Moore Show in her original apartment, with a little drop-down counter and bar stools at it, which make for a nice little dining situation for two people, and also provides extra seating for the living room. You can just turn those around. To tie the two spaces together, I had the backs of the bar stools upholstered in the same fabric that I made the Roman shade out of for the kitchen. Those are the major changes that I made when I moved in. So now the finishes were all selected in advance, of course, and they were all sort of based on this floor tile that I was able to find. I made a trip out to World of Tile in New Jersey. This was when they were still a going concern before the liquidation sale, and found this beautiful Japanese floor tile, which is an oblong rectangular tile with a penny dot in between in the corners. And it's in the loveliest shade of avocado green and brown. And so I thought that would be very 70s. And I picked up enough to do both the floor and the backsplash behind the sink. Now, I would have done the backsplash behind the stove, but originally there was a different stove here, which I'll tell you about in a little bit. So that was the first thing that I found. Then I looked for wallpaper. I was looking for a 70s wallpaper. I have a wallpaper fetish, as you know, from my entrance hall tour and also from the wall mural that I have in the living room. And I was able to find 2 wallpapers that coordinated well with the floor tile. The first one is a stripe that, and this is a fluke, but I actually found the wallpaper book that the stripe was featured in. And it's a very nice stripe. It's sort of a linen look, textured vinyl that has these wonderful olivey and sort of harvest gold kind of hues to it. And so I used that on 2 walls and also as panels on the appliances. Now, the other wallpaper is a General Tire and Rubber textured burlap in burnt orange that really is gorgeous. And I used that on the ceiling and by the window. So there's this nice sort of relationship between the 2 wallpapers. They work well together. They match in texture. And then I also was looking for a great countertop surface, and I really wanted to go with a laminate. And this is from a company called Peonite, and it is a color called Bittersweet. And I believe, I'm not entirely certain, that it has been around for many, many years. And it might be, it certainly is very similar in color to the countertops in the Brady Bunch kitchen. So I thought that was kind of a fun touch. Now, the cabinetry was a bit of a compromise. I didn't want to spend a lot of money on it. So I had my contractor spec out cabinet doors. They were all just plain slabs of MDF. And then what I did was I put a molding on that frames out the door and painted them in a color that coordinates well with the floor and the wallpaper. And then I antiqued them as I did the wall unit in my office area. There's a video of which that you can watch to see the process of how I did that. Now, probably more than any other detail in a vintage kitchen, what sets it apart from contemporary kitchens is the appliances. And so I did a lot of stepping to find the appliances that I wanted to make the kitchen feel authentic. My first incarnation of this kitchen was a little different than what's here now. I had a caloric dishwasher, original to the period, 18 inches wide, which is a little hard to find, and a Tappan Fabulous 400 40-inch oven. It's an eye-level oven that has a pull-out burner drawer below it. However, recently, about a year ago, the hinge that held the oven door on the bottom snapped off. It was a situation whereby finding another hinge could take years. And without the hinge, the oven door just comes off in your hand when you open it. So it was not tenable to keep it. So I started looking around for a replacement for that. And I was able to find, remarkably, a Kenmore oven, which you see in place here now, that was manufactured right around 1974, which is the year that I've honed in on for this apartment. And it had never been installed. So it was brand new old stock, had been sitting in someone's basement or garage, waiting for an apartment renovation for all of those years. And I was able to snag that. And so that's what's installed here now. And it really is a wonderful stove. It was sort of one of their high-end drop-in ranges. It's much simpler than the Tappan was, but it works beautifully. The thing that I'm so impressed about is that the clock actually works. you never find vintage ovens where the clock works right out of the bag. So it was really fun to have all of the elements functioning and working well. So if anyone has a source for a manual for it, I've looked and looked on the internet and I haven't been able to find it. But if you have a manual for a Kenmore drop-in range from 1974, shoot it my way. Now above the range is a range hood that I picked up to go along with it. Now the odd thing is the range was in the Boston area, and I went up in March, I believe, to pick it up. And then I was looking for a range hood around the same time, and lo and behold, this range hood turns up. Well, number one, it's from 1974. Number two, it was never installed either. And number three, it was in the Boston area. Isn't that odd? Anyway, there it is. It's really a lot of fun, and the color of the range hood is similar to the color that I've painted the floors in a good portion of the apartment. So there's a nice sort of tie-in with that color, and it coordinates nicely with the rest of the colors in the kitchen too. So that's the story of my new stove. Now, I've been in the apartment with this kitchen the way it is about 10 or 12 years. That is sort of the lifespan of contemporary appliances. All of the appliances that I have are older appliances. You can see that they were built to last longer because these appliances have lasted quite a long time. But the appliances are starting to age, and I'm starting to have problems with them. My original caloric dishwasher eventually just gave up the ghost. It was time to let it go. And I looked and looked and looked to try and find another 18-inch dishwasher that had the right look and feel to it. And I had no luck finding it. And eventually I just needed to bite the bullet. So I ended up buying this dishwasher, which is a contemporary 18-inch dishwasher. And one of the things that I was insistent upon was that it be a panel front. I have saved all the old parts from the caloric, and it is my intention to make that panel appear as if it were the original vintage dishwasher. So watch this space, because that's what you should see in the near future. I'm working on the video to document the process of doing that. Last but not least, my wonderful Sub-Zero 30-inch wide refrigerator, because the kitchen is small, has also started to develop problems. So this is the thing about living with vintage appliances. It's like living with a vintage car. You're constantly in need of doing maintenance on it. But I do love the way the kitchen looks with them. It really is nice to be able to immerse yourself in that period interior. There are lots of details that we don't have time for here, like, the problems that I've had with my vintage appliances and what I've done to correct them, and all the little wonderful accessories that I've found for the kitchen to lend 1970s authenticity to it. But I've made a video about all of this, or videos about all of this, over on my Patreon that you can watch. Just go to patreon.com/BreenyMaxwell. So now there are lots of special touches here that really lend authenticity to the 1970s feel. Let's talk about some of them. One of them that I particularly like is the Newtone Food Center. It's such a fun little appliance. It embeds in your countertop, and it's a little motor that will run a variety of different accessories. There are blenders and mixers, coffee grinders, meat grinders, ice crushers, can openers, all sorts of different appliances that can be connected to the Newtone Food Center. So I have a number of those accessories, and they're really fun to use and fun to demonstrate. I'll be doing a video about all the little fun things you can do with the Newtone Food Center in the near future to update a previous video I did about it before I installed it. So be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell to be notified when that goes up. Now, up above on this wall here, I've installed a very, very useful cookbook shelf. It is a big, long plank that allows me to store all of my cookbooks and a few little tchotchkes and keep things nicely organized. And it's really been a very effective thing to have. And I also made it a design feature as well. I found these wonderful wrought iron shelf supports on eBay, and they're just beautiful. The detail in them is really, really nice. It's not only just pure wrought iron, there are also some brass details as well. However, one of the problems was they were two different widths. So I decided to be creative, and I made a shelf that has a scalloped out central detail. And then one end I made wider, and the other end I made a little narrower. So it makes sense, and you sort of lose the fact that the shelf supports are different depths. So it worked out. Now, underneath my little shelf here on the island, you can see that I also have sort of a little wrought iron moment going on with these two supports that I have found that come from an old modular shelving unit from the 1970s. And they are actually plastic. They're not wrought iron. But they look great. They have a great profile to them. When I was putting in the kitchen, I decided I wanted to put in a little window seat. Now, the original windowsill is marble, and it could have been polished, I suppose, and be very pretty in that spot. However, at some point when they were doing a renovation here, they applied a sheet of drywall to that wall and left the raw edge of the drywall extending the width of the windowsill. So raw-edged drywall would not be a pretty finish for the top of a windowsill. So I decided to upholster a little board in vinyl and put it there on top of that marble windowsill and create a little window seat. It's really kind of a nice little spot to sit. At the time, my contractor smoked, so I thought it would be a good place for, if he wanted to come over, he could smoke out the window. But he doesn't do that anymore, and which is a good thing. My original kitchen faucet had a bit of a mishap. Have a look at Patreon for the details. So I ended up, when I did the rest of the renovation, putting the new stove in and having the new cabinetry made around it and all of that, I ended up picking up a Dishmaster faucet. Now, it's not the wall mount or deck mount sort of boxy Dishmaster that you normally see, because I prefer a single handle faucet, and they produce a single handle faucet actually. So I was able to pick up their version of a single handle faucet, and I like how it looks. I'm not all that impressed with the functionality of it. You pull the brush out, and then you pull up the stopper in the center of the faucet, and that diverts the water to the brush. And that is not as easy as just taking a sprayer out and pushing the end of it. As I was starting to get used to it, I would put the wand with the brush in it away before shutting the water off. It would just spray water at me. So I don't use it that much. I use it occasionally to clean out the inside of the sink. That I find as to be an effective use of it. Speaking of the sink, it's a vintage Harvest Gold model from Crane. But I do like the way the faucet looks, and it's very efficient and functional in other respects. So I do like it for that reason. So when I was doing the renovation, I made room for and jacks for 2 telephones. I know it's a little excessive. I wanted to put the little yellow trim line on the wall here because I think a kitchen should have a wall phone. And this one has a nice long cord, so you can take it all around the kitchen or even into the living room to have your conversation. And then at the same time, I also put in an extension over here on the end of the bar that's a little desk phone. That's not crazy, right? I mean, if you're having a conversation and you want someone to join you on the phone, that's a good place to do it, right? Over at the other end of the bar. Well, anyway, I think it's fun, and I like the way it looks. Let's talk a little bit about the decorator touches in the room. There are lots of them. Now, I had a little flight of fancy when we were installing the new oven. There was a panel below the stove that looked very plain to me. And I thought one night in bed, you know, I wonder if I could get a little carving that would go down there. And that's exactly what I did. I picked one up on eBay for very little, but it was like $24 or something like that. And it's this wonderful, ridiculous carving that sits below the oven and has been antiqued and detailed in the same way as the rest of the cabinetry. Now, the toe kicks on the appliances are all black metal. And so I have made the toe kicks throughout the kitchen black. I've painted them all black. And I think it looks very nice. Makes the cabinetry appear to be floating a little bit. I think that's a good look. On the doors that I have antiqued of the cabinets, I have found this wonderful hardware. And the nice thing about this hardware is that it was very, very popular in the 1970s as a designer hardware that you could install. It was part of the Amarok collection. And this particular style was called the Bonaventure line. And so I have used Amarok Bonaventure hardware throughout the entire apartment for cabinetry, switch plates and wall plates, and other details like that. So that's what I've done in here is I've used these Amarok drawer pulls and cabinet pulls for all of the hardware throughout the kitchen. I have put all the cabinet hardware in the center of the door, which was a very sort of shishi Hollywood Regency type detail in kitchens of the 1970s. I like it. I think it looks good. Now, another thing that I've done in the kitchen here is I have used copper as an accent. So I have wonderful copper cookware that I have hung on the wall to the right of the oven that is between the oven and the refrigerator. And I've polished it all up to a high shine. And I think it looks very nice. I think it's a nice finishing touch on that wall and in the kitchen in general. I think the copper echoes the orange tones in the room and the rest of the apartment and pulls everything together in a nice way. Now, in the lighting that I have above this counter here that I've installed, these eyeball lights, which are very nice lighting for this counter, very good for parties and things. The last one I have considered taking out and putting in a vintage pull-down wrought iron and copper light fixture that I have. I haven't really made a final decision about that yet. I think it would look very nice, and you could customize the light in that corner of the room, and you know, it pulls down and raises up. So it's kind of a nice finish, nice touch. But I'm not sure that I want that hanging over the counter or not. Anyway, something to think about. Just behind where that light fixture would hang, there is a really nice little, wonderful little display piece that I found. It is a vintage bar sign from the 1970s. In my last video, I talked a little bit about Vanguard Studios, which was an organization out in Los Angeles, sort of an art mill that made paintings. Well, they also made these wonderful expanded foam carvings. They're very nicely detailed and antiqued, and they look like a physical wood carving that you might find in an antique store somewhere. I love the simulacrous nature of them, the fact that they are imitating something that they are not, which is a very 1970s idea. So much fake wood grain back in the 70s. It was on everything. But I love that these are so nicely realized. And so this sign is an arm pointing, and on the sleeve of the arm it says bar. So I think that's a really sort of wonderful 70s touch. And I like that it is actually pointing to where the bar is, which you'll see in my next tour, which is my foyer and my dressing room. So be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell to be notified when that goes up. When I put the new stove in, I did not have enough of the original green tile to continue the backsplash across that wall. And so I wanted to come up with a solution that would look interesting and wouldn't require me to replace the backsplash over the sink, because number one, I like that tile. And number two, I like the fact that it twins with the tile on the floor. I think it makes sense. So you'll notice that there's a little bump out behind the sink. It's a little farther forward than the stove is. And that's an odd little detail about the layout of this kitchen. It has to do with where the brick is and where the rest of the, plaster and lath are. And so I decided to play into that idea that someone had bumped out the wall in order to put the plumbing in, and that the wall behind the stove was the original brick wall of the apartment. And so that's the conceit that we were going for with this look and putting this brick tile behind the stove. And I painted it and antiqued it, and I think it looks wonderful. So that was a sort of an interesting compromise, figuring out how to make that look intentional, like it was part of the original architecture of the room. Now on this wall, to the right of the refrigerator, I have a nice little arrangement of art. I found this wonderful wall clock. It's a Seth Thomas from the 1970s, and it's a butcher block with a burnt orange clock face. So I think that's very perfect for my apartment. And I think it looks really nice with the art that's hanging there. And there are two pieces that I bought by Carol Loomis when I was in high school back in Kansas City. And they are just charming. The bottom one is called Norse Mouse, and the one above is Jonathan Livingston Grasshopper. And then to the left of that is this lovely painted board that is a beautifully detailed bottle. So I believe it's a ketchup bottle or something like that. And it's got a lovely daisy in it. And it's just been so nicely rendered. It's one of my favorite little things. Again, I think I found that back in Kansas City when I was in high school. So I like keeping things like that give me pleasure. So all in all, it makes a nice little grouping. I hope you enjoyed this look at my kitchen. If you haven't seen them yet, there are other videos in my apartment tour series. Be sure and have a look. Don't forget to come by my Patreon for more details and stories about my kitchen. Patrons also have access to a large library of Brini content and a Discord server where we have discussions about vintage and retro subjects. You can find all of that and more at patreon.com/BriniMaxwell. A big thanks to those patrons who have made these videos possible with their support on Patreon. Until next time, keep on cooking!